Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host with another marvelous video. Welcome back to another exciting video about the Transformers. Today we're going to talk about the 13 Primes of Transformers. As fans of the franchise already know, the Primes are a group of influential and legendary robots who have played a significant role in the Transformers universe. In this video, we'll be discussing each of the 13 Primes, including their origins, abilities, and significance in the Transformers story, from the original Prime to the more recent additions. We'll delve into the rich history of these characters and explore their impact on the Transformers franchise. So join us as we take this journey into the lore of each of these 13 Primes. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The concept of the 13, how it all started. Primus created the 13, also known as the 13 Primes, and first forged to combat Unicron. They were each assigned the Prime title and treated as such. The overall origins of the 13 were revealed in Transformers: The Covenant of Primus on December 10th, 2013. The word and title Prime probably originated from the name Primer, but it's also possible that it's taken from the title of their creator, Primus. A creature known as the One broke apart to form Primus and Unicron. They fell apart during their investigation and they soon engaged in a battle over the fate of creation. However, being virtual twins, they were perfectly matched, and neither could maintain an edge for long, resulting in a stalemate. Primus developed the first Cybertronians in reaction, combining components of Unicron and himself. Primus's creation overcame Unicron, but at the expense of unintentionally absorbing a seed of the darkness within themselves. In the hope that other members of their race would arise, they founded civilizations on Primus's dormant body, now known as Cybertron. Like Primus and Unicron, the Primes battled with one another and finally died or vanished into their newly established civilization. They became the folklore, myths, and tales of their descendants, who would become as split as their forefathers, their creator, and his adversary. The live-action film series Dynasty of Primes was a group of Primes made up of only 7 individuals. Another version of the 13, influenced by their equivalents in the aligned continuity, would appear in IDW Comics in 2005 and 2019. According to a lot of other media, not all characters shown as part of the 13 were also members of other continuities. The Amalgamist cluster also has no 13. Rather, the further back in time one travels, the more unsophisticated the robots become.
Optimus Prime, you have embarked on a journey into Cybertron.
Primer, the leader of the 13. Primer was the 13's commander and the first Transformer created on Cybertron. He was a light warrior who wielded the Star Saber, which had the matrix of leadership at its hilt. Primer is the first of Primus's offspring. Being one of the original 2, Primer had a dark twin in Micronus, who possessed Unicron-like characteristics that contrasted with Primer's Primus-like nature. The Autobot emblem was inspired by Primer's face in various iterations of the story. Role in the Transformers universe. In the Transformers cartoon of the Generation 1 continuity family, Primer was created by the Quintessons using the remains of an obsolete robot that had failed to perform up to standard. The Quintessons meticulously broke down and reconstituted the robot's parts to form Primer. He is only the second documented holder of the matrix of leadership in history, but his ownership of it is often debated due to unclear circumstances surrounding it. Primer was unique among his peers as he was outfitted explicitly for fighting in an entertaining sport that the Quintessons enjoyed watching. He was forced to fight in their gladiator gaming pits along with other robots like him, and he found this never-ending battle for entertainment repulsive. During a bout with Sentinel Major, Primer harshly lashed out at his Quintesson masters while they were busy watching and enjoying the duel. He attacked a group of them and, as a result, was seemingly killed and thrown out into the air in a flaming wreck. He was succeeded by Prime Nova as the next, or the third, Matrix bearer. Primer was the second guide Rodimus Prime met once he entered the Matrix, and he went on to tell Rodimus all about the Quintessons' evil gladiatorial battles for sport. Primer's origin story clearly highlights the cruelty and malice of the Quintessons, as well as the power of resistance and rebellion, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Primer's strategy to vanquish Unicron was successful, but at the expense of implanting a dark seed in all 13. Primer was interested in the administration and the formation of a new society, but he was also paranoid, and he evaluated which of his brethren possessed the most Unicron-like characteristics. His team of 13 consisted of himself, Alpha Trion, and Vector Prime. When life began to thrive, Primer wished to tell them about change and the transformation cog, but Alpha Trion persuaded him that the timing wasn't suitable. Primus subsequently fought Predaking to defend his humanoid people from the Predacons. Meteoroids would strike their world, followed by a large solar flare that would generate tremendous heat and radiation. All Cybertronians were taken underground by the surviving Primes and taught how to begin stasis lock. Primer, on the other hand, made no attempt to assist the Predacons and insisted them all to perish, screaming and burning. After helping his people, Primer wasn't seen again. His sword was preserved, guaranteeing that his memory would live on. Personality. Primer was a strong champion and commander, but he was also a little suspicious and skeptical. He was self-aware enough to avoid being arrogant towards his fellow Primes, but he was always sure he was right and always in the right, which made him a tough bot to work with. But it did serve him well in a battle. He avoided his brother Micronus and Liege Maximo after the Chaos Bringer was defeated and grew wary of them. In his opinion, they were both wildly bad, whereas he and the others were absolutely good. Primer was very much devoted to the mission of bringing light to Cybertron and gladly engaged in one-on-one combat with a deadly opponent to safeguard his people. It is thought that his final act was to preserve the safety of Cybertronian civilians. He did harbor resentment as he left the Predacons to perish rather than teaching them stasis lock. He was rather pompous due to his possession of the Star Saber and was the first Prime. Ultimately, he became the very thing he despised, a Unicron-like entity. This is shown in a lot of his interactions, including his hatred for Solace Prime and notably in his animosity with Predaking, since he felt he was superior to him and had no qualms about allowing an entire race to perish, as Unicron threatened in One Shall Rise Part 2.
Prime, transform!
Vector Prime, the master of time and space. Vector Prime is a member of the 13 made by Primus to fight Unicron. He is an interdimensional wanderer who has spent most of his existence watching and occasionally intervening throughout the multiverse. As guardian of time and space, he's supposed to have access to every parallel reality and the ability to reverse or stop time itself. Vector Prime himself, however, is still constrained by space-time regulations. Vector Prime, it is stated, can never die and can only be shut out of some dimensions because he's existed outside of time for centuries and has a non-linear vision of events. Vector Prime was developed for the Cybertron animation and has since then become a very famous character among fans owing to his endless storytelling possibilities. Vector Prime is reminiscent of the Marvel comic superhero Eternity. This is appropriate considering that both represent time and space. Role in the Transformers universe. In fun publication comics Unicron Continuity Family, Vector Prime was created by Primus from the magnificent substance of a cosmos, at the extreme edge of entropy, at the start of its conflict with Unicron. Vector Prime retired from the stream of history during Primus and Unicron's long hibernation, at the start of time, to train for when his abilities would be called upon once more. He observed the Transformers' greatest victories and failures across several universes from his solitude, acting only when his intervention was required to maintain the harmony of time. It was only when Unicron and Primus were reawakened that Vector Prime was called back to active duty. Vector Prime traveled the cosmos pursuing Unicron's trail, attempting to prevent or repair whatever harm the Dark God had caused with his dark, evil and polluting presence. Primus attempted to seal Unicron's energy away in the heart of a newborn sun following the Powerlinks battles. But this scheme backfired horribly, causing the sun to implode into the Unicron singularity, which was a terrible black hole. To quickly solve this dangerous outcome of what was meant to rid the universe of the presence of Unicron's evil, Vector Prime was sent to Cybertron to aid the Autobots in discovering relics that would eliminate the black hole. Vector Prime's origin story highlights the importance of preparation and training for all of the Primes, as well as the importance of the Primes being ready to act when called upon in times of crisis. It also highlights the dangers of when the Primes attempted to eliminate evil without a clear understanding of the consequences of their actions. Vector Prime was present when the Well of Allsparks was activated. Vector Prime was an ideal Prime who sought the best in everyone. He recognized the fit of wrath in which the fallen Micronus Prime killed Solace Prime. When it was revealed that Liege Maximo was scheming to destroy the Primes, the remaining members expelled him as well. In grief, Vector Prime built a pocket realm for himself that was only open to others via the Blades of Time, which he handed to Nexus Prime. The Blades of Time were spread among Cybertronian cities and protected by one of Nexus's identities when Nexus fractured himself into 5 parts. He spent his existence traversing all of space and time as well as parallel worlds, using his realm as a type of home base and intervening to help in times of extreme need. Vector Prime encountered Optimus Prime, who had rebuilt the Blades of Time and whom he'd been waiting for millions of years later. He decided to help the Autobots and was startled to find Alpha Trion still functioning. He then pondered if any of the 13 were still alive, when Megatronus threatened to re-emerge, jeopardizing both Cybertron and Earth. Micronus Prime summoned Optimus Prime before Vector and the other 4 Primes who lived within the realm of the Primes in Battlegrounds Part 1. They were able to transfer their abilities to Optimus Prime and transport him to Earth. Vector announced on behalf of the group that they could recognize Optimus had not yet managed to complete the necessary arrangements that would enable him to successfully receive a small amount of energy from each of the gathered primes in order to effectively fight Micronus. But a passionate speech from Optimus managed to convince them to proceed with the power transmission. Personality. Vector Prime has famously broken Cybertron's fourth wall by appearing on Hasbro's Transformers webpage to answer viewer concerns regarding the series and products. He testified to having formerly wielded the Autobot matrix of leadership in the short-lived portion of the website called Ask Vector Prime, and frequently gave hilarious observations, such as his reaction to the creation of a disco ball mini-con.
But I fear that Iacon will not withstand the next
Alpha Trion, holder of the quill. Alpha Trion is one of the 13 made by Primus to combat and vanquish Unicron, one of the founders of the Cybertronian civilization alongside Alchemist Prime and a member of the High Council. Alpha Trion served in Iacon by sending ancient artifacts to Earth so that Optimus Prime could uncover them and take them before the Decepticons could. The visuals of Alpha Trion in Prime do not correspond to his Covenant artwork. Role in the Transformers universe. In the Transformers cartoon of the Generation 1 continuity family, 11 million years ago, a bot called A3 designed a gadget known as the Coda Remote to halt the Quintessence as part of the uprising against these vile robots upon an industrial world. In the year 2006, due to a time rift generated by Quintessence in the future, he was momentarily dragged from his place in the Empty Lands. Fortunately, before A3 was resurrected by the future Autobots to complete his duty in Cybertronian history, his compatriot, a bot known as Beta, was able to launch the uprising on time. Years later, the dying Sentinel Prime would give him the matrix of leadership, but Alpha Trion would not become an Autobot leader. It would remain unused in his hands until the arrival of the following Autobot commander. Meanwhile, Alpha Trion devised plans to reconstruct Autobots in order to better battle the rising Decepticon threat. When a group of time travelers brought a critically injured Orion Pax to Alpha Trion, the ancient Autobot recognized the potential within the young bot and decided to rebuild him, transforming him into the legendary leader, Optimus Prime. Alpha Trion also agreed to reconstruct Orion Pax's lover, Ariel, into the fierce female fighter, Alita 1, at Prime's request. Alpha Trion saw the Well of All Sparks activation when the Fallen killed Solace Prime. Alpha Trion grabbed the Forge of Solace Prime and several other Prime artifacts after his brothers died. Following her and Liege Maximus' funerals, as well as the death of many brethren to space and the Well of All Sparks, Alpha Trion stayed with Primer to start a new community. Once the Well of All Sparks was energized for the very first time, he was pretty interested in the just-born Orion Pax. Alpha Trion identified the Quintessence as Quintus Prime's creations when they attacked. He struggled to defend himself from their early assaults. He pondered what had become of his brother after he created the first Quintessence. The Quintessence were defeated by Alpha Trion and Sentinel Zeta. He was troubled by Sentinel's system of governance and also the reality that he assumed the title of Prime after they were vanquished. Cybertronian civilization eventually spread to the stars through space bridges. However, one of the ships became infected with the dreadful rust epidemic, which swept across all of the colonies. Because no solution could be found, all bridges except the one circling Cybertron were destroyed to safeguard Cybertron. After that, everyone seemed to forsake their desire to live, according to Alpha Trion. Alpha Trion objected to Sentinel Prime's creation of the caste system, but Sentinel banished him into the Hall of Records to be forgotten. He hurried to Vector Sigma, anxious for any moral booster in Cybertron, and asked the machine for a miracle. It informed him that his long-lost brother would one day return, but that in his present state he would need the assistance of Alpha Trion. The computer handed him the seal of Vector Prime, allowing him to communicate more effectively with the Covenant of Primus. He soon located his brother, Orion Pax, who was already in the Hall of Records. Alpha Trion waited till the perfect moment to revive him. Orion Pax was chosen as the next Prime by Alpha Trion and the members of the High Council. During the Great War, Smokescreen was Alpha Trion's primary guard. Alpha Trion trained the young bot a lot, and the two became close friends, with Smokescreen later stating that Alpha Trion was an excellent master. Alpha Trion believed Smokescreen was worthy of becoming a Prime since he trusted him enough to inform him about his participation in Optimus Prime gaining his title. Alpha Trion constructed an impenetrable container capable of retrieving the Allspark's pure form of energy from the ether after Optimus launched the Allspark into space. Many relics were given to Earth by Alpha Trion for Optimus to utilize. One of them was the Star Saber, on which he left a message concerning the Omega Lock and the Omega Keys. The Decepticons attacked Iacon as he was firing the last key. He may have taken out Smokescreen and implanted the final key into him out of desperation, knowing he would someday reach Earth. Smokescreen claims it was the final moment he saw Alpha Trion. Therefore, his fate is unclear. Ratchet asked Smokescreen whether Alpha Trion trained him to act better around humans when he was commanded to. The voicemail from Alpha Trion was played for Optimus when he obtained the Star Saber. After receiving his mentor's message, Optimus learned of the Star Saber, the rest of the artifacts, and the Omega Lock. Under Alpha Trion's orders, he concealed the Omega Lock and kept it hidden from his troops. Optimus was stopped by Alpha Trion when he was ready to merge with the Allspark. Trion inquired as to why Optimus had delayed it. Optimus stated that he didn't dread death, but rather the destiny of the Matrix. Smokescreen, according to Alpha Trion, would make a great Prime and, well, despite his youth, would understand how to become one, much like Optimus formerly did. Optimus hesitated to leave such a responsibility on Smokescreen, but was subsequently resurrected by him, who awakened Optimus by laying the Forge of Solace Prime in his hand. This gave Optimus a new and more powerful body. Personality. Alpha Trion is a knowledgeable and quiet bot. He's demonstrated to be an excellent instructor because he tutored both Optimus and Smokescreen. In the days leading up to the war, he was frantic to save Cybertron and attempted to call a High Council hearing, which only worsened the conflict. This deed demonstrated Alpha Trion's great compassion for Cybertron. He's also shown that he's not a warrior. Alpha Trion is old, profoundly instructs his pupils, and has a wisely picked heir. He is intelligent and informed and uses perplexing methods of explaining to his pupils which benefits them.
Micronus, you know you need no invitation to visit me.
Solace Prime, the master, artificer, and creator of many of the Prime's weapons. Primus created Solace Prime as one of the 13. Solace is a Lady Prime who crafts historic Cybertronian weaponry and treasures. Her most spectacular creation is the array of beautiful weapons and symbols carried by the first Primes, which was manufactured by an icon of her very own creation, the Forge of Solace Prime. She finds satisfaction in creation, which is why she's particularly close to Micronus Prime, Nexus Prime, and Onyx Prime, all of whom like similar projects. Her most intimate relationship is with Megatronus. The two are bonded by a tight, committed, passionate love that is unique among the 13, and they spend a lot of time enjoying one another's company. The Solace Prime look is royal, with silver and black accents. She is notable not just for being a talented creator, but also for being the very first and, thus far, only female Prime. While the history of the 13 varies according to the many pieces of material in the aligned timeline, they all acknowledge that Megatronus killed Solace. The distinction is that in the novels, he desired ultimate power and threatened Solace with death if she didn't stand with him, but the Covenant depicts them as star-crossed partners. However, there is no hint of any romance in Robots in Disguise. Role in the Transformers universe. Primus created Solace Prime as one of the 13 to face Unicron, and she was given a hammer named like herself. Alpha Trion seemed to have no explanation for why Solace was a woman while the other 12 were all male. He guessed it was because of Primus's desire to expand species variety. Because Solace was the sole female Prime, there will always be one Lady Cybertronian for every 12 male Cybertronians. She felt a connection with Megatronus Prime after the war and developed a conflict with Primer. Liege Maximo requested her to create his armor while he was producing war monsters. Even after he lavished her with presents, she was unwilling to give him the Apex armor. He attempted to persuade Megatronus to acquire it for him. However, this ended up in a lover's quarrel, which resulted in her being accidentally murdered with the Requiem blaster. Before she died, she promised Megatronus her eternal love. Primer attempted to exploit this to unite his compatriots against Megatronus, just for Megatronus to reveal Liege's role. Solace's body was deposited in a beautiful tomb made by her remaining siblings after a brutal fight. A semi-sentient projection of her talked to Optimus Prime eons later. She directed him to the Requiem blaster and dropped indication that Nexus Prime was nearby. Solace Prime never appears, yet her name is referenced several times by Strongarm and Fixit in Transformers Robots in Disguise. In Part 2 of Battlegrounds, Fixit informs B's crew that Megatronus destroyed Solace Prime when he turned against his fellow Primes without mentioning their connection. Personality. Except for Primer, who had a mutual enmity with Solace, most of the 13 were fond of her. Micronus Prime, the conscience of the 13. Micronus, the name of Minicon Prime, is revealed in Transformers The Covenant Primus. Micronus Prime was the very first Minicon and a member of the 13 formed by Primus to combat and vanquish Unicron and see the Well of Allsparks activated. He chose to join the Allspark after the War of the Primes. He was able to improve his skills and abilities by interacting with the other 13 members. Notably, he helped Solace Prime create several of the 13's relics. The capacity of Micronus Prime to enhance different Cybertronian abilities is a nod to Transformers Armada, the very first installment of the Unicron trilogy. Role in the Transformers universe. Micronus mentored Optimus Prime inside this realm of the Primes to start preparing him for an impending storm. To that aim, Micronus sent Optimus to climb a hill, a feat made more difficult by an unfriendly robot with 4 Minicon minions battling a bunch of virtual people who, as far as Optimus knew, were alive. During the training, Micronus frequently antagonized Optimus when he sought his help, but Micronus finally reaffirmed Optimus to his main mission. This enabled Optimus to activate one of his new sword's powers, the Prime Decepticon Hunter, which had been the exercise's whole goal. He asked Optimus whether he was prepared for his upcoming lesson after emphasizing to him the importance of learning to deal with diversions during the next confrontation. Unfortunately, the dreaded moment came before Optimus's training was completed, but Micronus still chose him instead of the other Primes. Micronus, along with the other Primes, gave some of their strength to Optimus and dispatched him to Earth when he persuaded them. Following the fight with Megatronus, Micronus came to Bumblebee's crew on Earth, although his visage was only visible on Grimlock's right-hand side in Dino mode. Micronus notified Optimus of the conclusion of the fight with Megatronus. He reclaimed the power Optimus had earned from the remaining Primes, even though this now ensured that Optimus was in a weaker position. Micronus scanned him and claimed he would heal before disappearing from Grimlock's side. Personality. Micronus Prime is exceptionally private. He seems cold and haughty, but he demonstrates compassion, courage, and intelligence.
Oh, yes, I'm still here. For now.
Alchemist Prime, student of the elemental structure of the natural world. Alchemist Prime is a member of the 13 created by Primus to combat and defeat Unicron. He also witnessed the activation of the Well of Allsparks. Alchemist Prime and Alpha Trion co-founded the early Cybertronian civilization, while the other Primes split across space and time following the Great Schism. Role in the Transformers universe. As per Alpha Trion in Transformers Exiles, upon seeing Cybertron's progress towards civilization, he went out in search of the Liege Maximo in order to jail him for his crimes. Even though he never met his sibling again, Alpha Trion considered him successful. However, according to the Covenant of Primus, Maximo perished on Cybertron, making Alchemist's fate even more mysterious. Personality. Alchemist Prime's personality in history has received very little attention, and as of 2012, he'd never been featured in any Transformers line of toys or narratives. Nexus Prime, the first and greatest combiner. Nexus Prime, also called as the Wizard of Forms, is a member of the 13 formed by Primus to fight Unicron, and was there when the Well of Allsparks was activated. He also is the very first and most powerful combiner. He was an unpredictable trickster who was intrigued by change. He also possesses the Omni-Saber and Cyber Caliber. When Nexus Prime was first unveiled, he was called Nexus Maximus. However, it was subsequently determined that this was a registered name relating to an adult brand. Therefore, Maximus was substituted with Prime. Role in the Transformers universe. Nexus appeared during the Great War, built from 2 Velocitronians, Mainspring and Clocker, 1 Cybertronian, Chain Drive, and 2 Junkions, Cannon Spring and Pinion, each bearing a Cyber Caliber component. When all of his components came together, he was ultimately reconstructed. He instantly began assisting the Autobots and Optimus Prime in their struggle against the Decepticons and the rescue of Junkion. He observed Megatron during the battle and confused him for being the Fallen. He raced immediately for the Decepticon leader, overcome by recollections of the sorrow and agony Megatronus had brought upon the 13, only to be startled when he realized that he wasn't actually his betraying brother. He then began to closely observe Megatron, frightening the Decepticon commander. Nexus was astounded by the clockwork precision with which history repeated itself, making a note of the Decepticon's title, jet mode, dark energon use, and cannon adorning his right arm. He cautioned Megatron that reminding any Prime of the Fallen was a quick way to arouse their anger. Nexus deliberately divided himself into 5 fresh new Cybertronians when the conflict concluded, and the Decepticons and Autobots were about to leave to stop the immoral Starseekers from learning of his great potential. Personality. Nexus was a jokester through and through. He was also incredibly fun-loving and helpful, as is evident when he helps the Autobots and Optimus Prime defeat Megatron. He was friendly with Solace Prime, which supposedly provoked jealousy among some of his brothers, and was considered a jokester, but Alpha Trion was never amused with his jokes. Onyx Prime, the first beast form Cybertronian. Onyx Prime was the first Cybertronian to have a beast mode, making him the progenitor of the Predacons and also one of the 13. He's not recorded to have used weaponry, although he did own the Triptych mask as a personal item. The Beast Prime's name is revealed to be Onyx in Transformers: The Covenant of Primus. Because he's the first known Cybertronian with a beast mode, it's possible that all Cybertronian-based mechanical beings, including the Amphiboids, Buffaloids, Chomperzoids, Corvicons, Croctobots, Dinobots, Insecticons, Orangutans, Predacons, Sharkticons, Shrimpticons, and Skunkticons are descended from and related to Onyx. Role in the Transformers universe. He was one of the 13 formed by Primus to fight and defeat Unicron and witness the genesis of the Well of Allsparks. Unfortunately, he was killed in the War of the Primes and opted to join the Well to ensure that the closeness of Primus's flame would keep him alive. Despite his injuries, he was dragged into the Well with Optimus Prime, who wished to be resurrected as a lower Cybertronian, and his companion Micronus Prime. He later used his triptych mask to transform the Cybertronians that emerged out of the Well, such as the initial Predaking, along with the other Predacons. It's unknown what happened to him subsequently, as fresh Predacons stopped emerging from the Well after the Great Cataclysm. Personality. Onyx has an alpha mindset since he appreciated the edge that his odd talents afforded him against the other Primes at times. And even with this, he's the only one of the 13 who has maintained friendships with all of the others, including the volatile Megatronus. The IDW Comics depiction of Onyx Prime was more like the Transformers' Prime representation of Predaking in attitude and character. Amalgamist Prime, the Joker of the 13 and the first shifter. Amalgamist Prime is a member of the 13 characters established through the Prime storyline. Role in the Transformers universe. His contribution was the transformation cog, after which all subsequent T-cogs were designed. On the other hand, he was considerably more sophisticated than any other. He was also the very first shifter, a subtype of Cybertronians with highly advanced T-cogs that allowed them to take a significantly broader assortment of forms, including other Cybertronians. Amalgamist Prime was present for Solace Prime's trial of the Requiem Blaster. Solace voted to dispose of it after the test as it was too strong. Amalgamist voted to preserve it. Personality. The depiction of Amalgamist Prime in Exiles as a trickster and shapeshifter with large horns makes him akin to Loki. He was the Prime's trickster, but he also had a short temper and was quickly irritated. Quintus Prime, a daydreamer. Quintus Prime is a member of the 13 formed by Primus and the experimental Dreamer, who is considered to be the originator of the Quintessence. In Transformers: The Covenant of Primus, Quintus's name was revealed. Considering how the Quintessence stole space bridge tech but didn't fully comprehend how it functioned, it's plausible that Quintus Prime developed space bridges. Role in the Transformers universe. His one-of-a-kind ability was personified in the Ember Stone, an item similar to Primus' spark that could start the explosion of life processes in base materials. During his brothers' conflicts, Quintus Prime largely remained in the background. When his new existence on Cybertron began, he boarded a spacecraft and set off to explore the cosmos on his own. He brought his Ember Stone with him to try to achieve his desire of producing new life. He eventually arrived in a world rich in metal, similar to Cybertron. He named the planet Quintessa and began his research. He ultimately succeeded in developing the Quintessence. Quintus's fate after this is unclear. However, Alpha Trion assumed his brother had been slain by his offspring shortly after making them, after seeing how cruel and manipulative they were. Personality. Quintus was a carefree daydreamer with a penchant for perfectionism and idealism. He was continuously looking for ways to articulate his thoughts and was eager to prove his beliefs legitimate through experimental innovation. He was sometimes hampered in this by less inventive primes who didn't have time for his musings, but he possessed a mind incomparable to any other and was reluctant to let it fallow solely for the purpose of quiet and peace. He was adamant that existence was the most essential, sacred right and that it should be promoted to grow at all times, in all forms, in order to enhance the cosmos. Liege Maximo. Liege Maximo is one of the original 13 Primes created by Primus to confront and kill Unicron, and he witnessed the Well of Allsparks being activated. He's also known as the Manipulator. Depending on the novel, Liege Maximo's destiny varies. Liege Maximo departed Cybertron and was tracked down and caught by Alchemist Prime in Transformers: Exiles. According to Transformers: The Covenant of Primus, Maximo died on Cybertron, and his grave was later invaded by Megatron and Dreadwing. Liege Maximo's coloring differs from the official artwork in the series. This might be due to the Covenant and Prime being made mostly separately from one another. Role in the Transformers universe. The Ligian darts were literal darts packed with various poisons that Maximo could employ to destabilize others, but the true darts were his remarks and ideas, their sharpness and effects unrivaled by any ordinary physical weapon. Liege Maximo was actually ripped away and had his skull blasted off by the Fallen in the final confrontation that tore the 13 apart. The majority of his body pieces were put into the mausoleum his brothers constructed out of scrap and spare components, which was eventually buried deep within their metropolis. The Covenant of Primus reveals that the unidentified Prime arm Megatron used to access the Forge of Solace Prime originated from Liege Maximo. Megatron and Dreadwing stormed the crypt that contained his body late in the Great War to get his arm. After that, Knockout joined the arm to Megatron's right arm, enabling Megatron to bear the Forge of Solace Prime. After that, he used this arm for a while until Optimus Prime cut it with a Star Saber after Megatron threatened Earth. When the Omega Lock detonated, his arm was most likely destroyed. Despite the fact that his arm was visible, Liege Maximo's identity was never mentioned. Personality. Maximo was the manipulator, the one who could twist words and thoughts far more readily than metal. His silvery tongue was full of eloquent charm, and he quickly learned how to push whatever idea he was peddling to the individual in question, adapting his words and actions to perfectly match their needs or to fuel their suspicions. He was typically silent and observant, absorbing and calculating. He had an uncanny ability to figure out where a person's nuts and bolts were buried, where their hidden switches were. He was created to win with plots when open conflict faltered or to avoid war with foresight. His diplomacy was aided by a generally endearing aspect that made his pity appear sincere, and Alpha Trion felt it was. He immersed himself totally into every position he believed would suit him, quickly becoming convincing to himself. The power these abilities offered him over others, the majority of whom were ignorant at the time, was immeasurable. The rest of the Primes weren't prepared for someone as multifaceted as he was. He realized this quickly and began plotting his own veiled path to power right in front of Primer's eyes, who couldn't possibly contemplate such schemes. The books and the Covenant present him in nearly polar opposite ways. While he plotted for domination in both, he's portrayed in the books as Megatronus' sidekick and is nowhere near as dangerous. Most current Cybertronians had never heard of him, and he was seen as a pretender instead of the genuine threat posed by the Fallen. While in the Covenant, he poses a significant threat due to his ability to split and kill the Primes just with words. Many fans believe that Starscream is a descendant of Liege Maximo, owing to his demeanor. The Fallen, once known as Megatronus, guardian of entropy and wielder of the Requiem blaster. The Fallen, previously identified as Megatronus, is a member of the 13 Primes, the creator of the Decepticons, and also the mentor of Megatron, his pupil. In Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, he's the leading Decepticon and antagonist. Role in the Transformers universe. The Fallen claims that he and his siblings were the first Allspark creations. The world that would one day in the future become Cybertron was mainly uninhabited and barren, but as the Allspark slowly and steadily created Cybertron around them, it bestowed strength beyond imagination on the Fallen and his brethren. The cube's inner power was drained. They discovered that its strength could be recharged by extracting the energies of stars, but despite their extraordinary ability to move between dimensions utilizing triangle sarcophagi, they weren't able to locate additional stars to serve their needs. As he explored, the Fallen began to believe that the Allspark was speaking to him, telling him that his fate would be better than his brother's and that it had chosen him as its favored one. To help the dynasty of Primes on their mission, the Allspark produced a race of laborers with their own exceptional talent, the capacity to morph their bodies into various shapes. Some, known as Seekers, could transform into interplanetary vessels that could discover stars for the Primes, the energy of which would eventually be gathered by humongous machines created by the other workers to power the Allspark. The dynasty's quest was dampened by the rule of avoiding stars with sentient worlds, and the Fallen thought that the dynasty's empathy would eventually condemn the Cybertronians to destruction. The Fallen began to have evil ideas as he explored a solution to this predicament. What if there weren't any other Primes with whom to share the Allspark? What if its might was all his? The Fallen began courting Transformers to join his cause. He chose a small group of Constructicon robots to do his bidding in private, eventually overthrowing the dynasty of Primes in favor of his own goal. This team was dubbed the Decepticons by him. The Fallen's most loyal and talented seeker, Jetfire, began unintentionally harvesting the stars of populated star systems. The pair would scan a galaxy together, and the Fallen would claim that his search regions were lifeless. This tactic landed Jetfire and the Fallen in hot water with the other Primes, so the Fallen began to plant seeds of distrust in Jetfire. He said that the Primes' unwillingness to sacrifice lives to rescue their own world would be their undoing, and that a legion would be needed in the event that the Primes deceived them all. The Fall attempted to construct a star harvester by himself using a fake matrix of leadership that he had created. It was, however, unstable, and the explosion that occurred due to its instability gave the Fallen a strength he had never known before. He was suddenly filled with evil, horrific and powerful abilities from within. Micronus Prime journeyed from world to world, murdering dozens of species and acquiring any tech and gadgets that he found useful, leaving the empty and desolate husks of the planets that he destroyed in his wake, starting to feel a more profound sense of meaning that worked well in tandem with his dark, ever-engulfing powers. The Fallen grew and grew, and he prepared for his ultimate confrontation with the rest of his kind as his powers inflated and rose. As Jetfire embraced the Decepticons, the Fallen then transported them to the newfound planet Earth, where they constructed a star harvester to seize the sun. It did, however, contain life. The Fallen was keen on building the harvester there, either to entice his brothers into attacking while he was preparing to murder them all, or to stay in limbo. He won either way. Jetfire ultimately ended up betraying his master as soon as the other primes gathered and fell into the traitor's snare. The Fallen transported his other lackeys and Jetfire away, leaving him alone with his brothers. The Fallen's war with the other primes proved expensive. They were surprised by the Fallen's might, and they were crushed under his cruel hand, one at a time. Since the last time they met, he'd broadened his awareness, assimilated the mental bulk of a hive intellect 70 trillion strong, and examined the brain operations of beings that float in unstructured thought. He became so much more than they had been. The Fallen was capable of obtaining armaments from his stockpile using personal spatial portals, and he slew his brothers one by one until there was just one prime remaining to confront him. The final prime escaped with one last frantic bet, and both he and the Fallen shifted from place to place. The Fallen assumed this prime was only delaying, but he was tragically incorrect. When the last prime had gathered the remains of his defeated brethren, and the Fallen was exhausted from over-teleportation, he utilized their united life force to expel the Fallen forever. The Fallen was ejected from his sarcophagus and sent to another world, where he landed upon a lonely terrain, threatening vengeance. This knowledge was lost over time, and the dynasty of Prime remained nothing more than a legend. However, a few thousand years later, the Fallen's coffin was discovered on contemporary Cybertron and transported to the headquarters of the world's military commander, Megatron. Sensing his rage and hatred, the Fallen made a link with Megatron, instilling in him a renewed determination to kill those who sought the Allspark. Following Megatron's deadly struggle against a number of aliens wanting the Allspark, the Fallen asked him to grab control of Cybertron in order to pave the way for his impending resurrection. He also warned him that Optimus was looking for the Allspark for his own selfish use, and Megatron promptly made up his mind that Optimus and all his supporters deserved to be murdered for their actions. However, merely capturing the world wouldn't be enough. Micronus Prime also instructed Megatron to construct a spaceship to search for the Matrix, which he stated was a necessity for his return. As the vessel was being built, the Fallen told Megatron everything there was to know about his origins and his intentions for the extractor on Earth. The Fallen told Megatron to put his remains into the vessel and then remain behind to battle Optimus's legions and safeguard the Allspark. The vessel was run by Soundwave and a good portion of the Decepticon warriors. Around this time on Cybertron, a massive war broke out between the Decepticons of Megatron and Optimus's Autobots, resulting in the launch of the Allspark into space. To Soundwave's utter shock, the Nemesis was able to locate the Allspark's powerful signature. Micronus Prime then spoke to Soundwave just when a spacecraft collided with the Nemesis and vanished through a portal. After landing the spacecraft on a lifeless and abandoned world, Soundwave was immediately asked to chase the vessel through the portal it left behind, which the Fallen soon realized was a space bridge. Megatron eventually discovered the abandoned Nemesis when he was on the hunt for the Allspark. After another deep and profound discussion with the Fallen, once again, who was very frankly outraged that Megatron had made such a massive detour, he ordered him to continue the pursuit right away, sure that the cube could lead them to the extractor. Megatron obeyed and abandoned the sarcophagus somewhere amid the ruins. Soundwave soon reappeared about a few thousand years later, having salvaged a small section of the space bridge column from the Autobot spacecraft. Soundwave was told of Megatron's arrival soon enough by the Fallen, and he determined Megatron was among the Cybertronians supposed to be held hostage by humans, which spurred him to return. The Fallen then utilized the pillar to bend space and time, finally escaping from his captivity. Personality. Michael Bay compared the Fallen with Judas Iscariot, while his portrayal in the film is more akin to Jehoram of Judah. The Fallen is malicious and self-centered and can't see any greater purpose beyond his own selfish and greedy motives. The 13th Prime, the most mysterious of the Primes. Often known simply as 13, is the final member of the founding Primes and the group's most elusive member. In general, nothing is known about him other than the fact that his abilities are handed on to the Autobot commanders. Role in the Transformers universe. The 13th Prime was originally Optimus Prime, the Prime's mediator and visionary, who unified them by becoming the first of their kind to raise a hand in salutation. Optimus opted to be reincarnated as a regular Cybertronian through the Well of Allsparks, when the 13 were ripped apart by internal turmoil, losing recollection of his history and being known as Orion Pax. Pax would later take up the matrix of leadership to reclaim his identity as Optimus Prime, and after putting himself in danger to restore Cybertron, he would rejoin his siblings in the realm of the Prime, where he would be groomed for a mission to Earth to confront his fallen brother, Megatronus. In the 2005 IDW chronology, the 13th Prime, whose identity was later lost, with Cybertron knowing him only as the Arisen, was one of the 13 tribes' leaders who joined together in Crystal City with his fellow Primes to form a new civilization. A few million years later, the Mistress of Flame came to think that Optimus Prime was the Arisen, which Optimus used to create change on Earth, and Shockwave designated Optimus as the Arisen whilst disguised as Onyx Prime. At the conclusion of his lifetime, time, Optimus claimed to be the Arisen, but he died before he could justify his claim. Later on, RC would realize that Arisen's true name didn't matter in comparison to the magnificent legacy he left behind. Personality. Regardless of whether the 13th Prime was in fact Optimus Prime, the legacy of 13 is immense, and there's little doubt that he may be the most powerful and valued member of the 13 Primes. He was able to unify the Primes and assist them in destroying Micronus. That was a magnificent effort that deserves all of the credit. Optimus grapples with the subject of his own identity, but he eventually realizes that it doesn't matter. His deeds are what make him, and he's without a doubt the best of the Primes in that regard. Marvelous appearance of the 13 Primes in TV shows and live-action movies. Only 7 Primes were the first to wield the Matrix and utilize it to power a sun harvester in the Revenge of the Fallen film. They refused to utilize Earth after discovering it had sentient life, and the Fallen attacked them for it. They snatched it from his hands and martyred their lives to hide it since he was too strong for them in combat. In the modern day, Sam Witwicky discovered the Matrix, but it disintegrated in his hands. Yet, in a dream, the Dynasty offered it to him to wield when he proved worthy, informing him that the Matrix must be gained rather than discovered. Sam used it to restore Optimus after being resurrected, but the Fallen snatched it before it entirely fixed Optimus and used it to fuel the Sun Harvester. Optimus defeats the Fallen and wrecks the Harvester after being fueled up by Jetfire. The Matrix reappeared in the Dark of the Moon when it was utilized to resurrect Sentinel Prime. Optimus subsequently hands Sentinel the Matrix, claiming that he was the true commander of the Autobots throughout the conflict and urges him to command them again. On the other hand, Sentinel rejects and hands Optimus the Matrix, explaining that Optimus is now his mentor in a new realm he knows nothing about, namely Earth. Alpha Trion, Micronus Prime, and Solace Prime were addressed by name in Transformers Prime, while the entire crew emerges in a vision in the episode titled One Shall Rise, Part 1. Alpha Trion is the sole member to appear in the episode titled Alpha Omega, and even communicates in a message to Optimus, as well as in Rebellion using the Well of Allsparks, where he's voiced by George Takei. In the previous episode, Liege Maximus appeared, though he was dead and his image couldn't be seen, nor was he identified, but Megatron amputated his right arm to use it for himself to unlock the forge of Solace Prime to develop the Dark Star Saber, from a small piece of dark energon to evenly complement him with Optimus Prime, who had recently obtained Primus Star Saber. Marvelous verdict. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the 13 Primes of the Transformers universe. We hope you enjoyed learning about these powerful and legendary robots and their significance in the Transformers universe. From the original Primer, to the more twisted and vicious ones like the Fallen. Each of these characters has played a unique role in shaping this franchise. We hope the video has provided you with a deeper understanding of the rich history and lore of the Transformers, and that it sparked your interest in learning more about these beloved characters and their lives. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
Now I claim your son.